name is Héctor Berdecia-Hernández, and I currently lead the Centro de Conservación y Restauración de Puerto Rico, a new nonprofit regional conservation center serving the Caribbean. As I intend to present some of my perspectives as a young conservator, I will reflect on what innovation means as a conservation practitioner in a context where the conservation discipline has yet to reach its maturity. When we talk about innovation, we often think about actions and words such as advance, progress, improve, move, and forge ahead. It is generally associated with how we envision the future. Nevertheless, it's an opportunity to think about what we envision and reflect on the present and our past. But how can we think about innovation while reflecting on the past? Well, cultural heritage practitioners, specifically conservation professionals, understand the importance of reflecting on the past, especially before undertaking any treatment, intervention on an object or work of art. It is actually part of the conservation standard methodology, documentation, and historic research. Both are essential to understanding the values and significance and guide the decision-making process before and during the treatment. Our cultural heritage, from buildings through collections, comes in many different sizes and shapes, and resides in the diverse and complex environmental and social cultural context. These challenges requires and push conservators and conservation practitioners to embrace innovative practices to meet the needs of our heritage. When we talk about innovation in general, but more specifically in conservation, we have to consider two specific attributes. First, innovation pushes and or breaks disciplinary boundaries. The second, innovation seeks flexibility and adaptation. Conservation in theory had its roots in these two attributes. It embraces and fosters collaborative practice, pushing and breaking boundaries from various disciplines, including museology, visual arts, art history, archaeology, and the hard sciences. Since its conception, conservation is also framed as an adaptive and flexible field in which while we follow our own recognized methodologies, we can still use research methods and knowledge from all these other disciplines towards the same goal. In this sense, conservation by its nature has defined and has developed itself as a continuously innovative field. As a young practitioner, I was trained in the United States since there are no established conservation professional degrees in Puerto Rico. Even learning and accessing conservation education has its difficulties. The first barrier was finding almost someone who could provide proper guidance to entering the field. Since then, specific inquiries about the development of the discipline have led me to learn more about conservation practice in Latin America and Europe. I've been asking the same question for years. How can conservation practice advance in a context without proper training, where there are very few professionals and there is a lack of economic resources, while the need of cultural heritage are so pressing? Also, how do we build this from scratch? These certainly are questions that many conservation practitioners from around the world in countries and regions where both resources and expertise are absent. Still, one of the specific questions has flowed into my mind. How can established principles, methodologies, and practices of a field develop entirely in the global north and consider only its heritage be adapted to other contexts? Is conservation practice receptive to adaptation and flexibility as it is in theory? Well, my thought is yes. How? That is a challenge. And if we can figure it out how, that is precisely innovation. In this presentation, we'll discuss our recent efforts to create what is now the Conservation Center for Puerto Rico, including the learned lessons and approaches from this short experience. Before embracing this, we must discuss in detail the context, which is similar throughout the region, despite the political and cultural differences between the Caribbean island nations. When discussing a specific context and challenges for Puerto Rico and the Caribbean region, we must acknowledge two particular factors: environmental and climate, and the socio-economic and educational challenges. This last one is often intertwined with socio-economic challenges. When we discuss environmental and climate conditions, we have to consider first the tropical climate, a climate with abundant thermal energy and humidity, where raining and extremely hot days are usual. It is not a stable environment as climates as temperate regions, but also there are insects and biological growth. It's a prone environment for them. This also brings another set of specific considerations regarding the treatment of insects and biological agents toward our cultural heritage. Lastly, but not least, climate change. Different scientific studies point out that climate change has a disproportionate impact on the global south. For the Caribbean, threats include sea level rise, intense periods of rain and flooding, more intense heat, and a humid environment. Nevertheless, the catastrophic effects of natural disasters, such as stronger hurricanes, make our cultural heritage more vulnerable. This climatic phenomena occurs on an annual basis. When we talk about the socio-economic context and the research needs on research, training, and practice, we have to consider first, there's a lack of economic resources for conservation work and cultural institutions, since these institutions are often community-based. There's a lack of updated policy tools, lack of technical expertise and specialized technical services. But we also have to consider the political context. For example, Puerto Rico has language barriers. The rest of the island, everyone speaks Spanish, but most of the conservation expertise is in English. On the other hand, access to international national level expertise is also another barrier. Every time that we would like to connect and access to expertise in Latin America and the Caribbean, it's difficult because of our complicated relationship with the United States. Inequity and social fragmentation and the existence of a small cultural heritage community also led for competition, for few resources available, and a lack of collaboration environment. On the other hand, we have inadequate management. Because conservation work is too costly or too difficult, our projects are driven by last-minute consideration rather than a planned approach or planned decision-making process. There's a lack of research, and specifically research targeted to the conservation of our cultural heritage that can consider our resources and our environmental context. Existing research often focuses on perspective from disciplines such as social and political history and archaeology, but not conservation. On the other hand, we have no academic training and professional degree programs in conservation. We have two small pilot programs that started a few years ago at the University of Puerto Rico and the Politécnica University of Puerto Rico. The University of Puerto Rico is facing budget cuts, and Politécnica University is also facing hard economic turmoil. To build an academic program, you need expertise and faculty from abroad and educational resources, such as specific conservation collections in libraries to promote research. And this is something that institutions cannot afford now. Also, there's almost no or few professional development opportunities for conservation and cultural heritage professionals. And there are also gaps in access to information and research papers. The current needs and natural disasters, including Hurricane Maria and Fiona, have led to the foundation of the Centro de Conservación y Restauración de Puerto Rico as a nonprofit conservation center to serve the Caribbean region in late 2020. The center was founded considering these complex challenges while attempting to solve or at least deal with them collaboratively. Even though we're still in early stages, our project's and current work has been guided by the following lessons and approaches. The first approach has been acknowledging, actually, and embracing our context, both from a social, economic, and cultural standpoint. First, we have to access available resources, both technical and financial. But second, we have to assess current needs. We ask ourselves, what are the current needs and how we can prioritize them? Also, we assess opportunities, and we ask ourselves, what opportunities do we have or are available? But also, we consider the school of thought and related to the conservation field. And we ask ourselves, do we have to choose, or can we be flexible to incorporate practices from the Anglo-Saxon, Mediterranean, and Latin American regions? The lessons learned from that process have led us to think and envision the development of an adaptive approach to advance the conservation practice in Puerto Rico through the Conservation Center. And the first thing that there are 7 points specifically. And the first one that we are embracing is prioritizing, expanding the field assessment, and getting as much information as possible, assessing needs. And for us, data is available to guide our decision-making process. Second was to figure out model and plan. We have to consider diverse existing models and define our scope of work. In our case, we decided buildings and collections, and this helped to select and tailor a model that was appropriate and financially sustainable on a long-term basis. The third point was to foster small, impactful projects. These are based on the needs assessments and the relevance. For example, we're looking to promote innovative topics on the study of cultural heritage and its conservation. So for us, that is relevant. The third, we sought to transform any project into an opportunity to create outreach and to promote building capacity. Training and professional development is key to fostering technical expertise on the conservation and management of collections and sites. These initiatives must try to complement academia and current research. Point number 5 was adapting traditional methodologies and practice or building new ones. Our context pushes us to do more with less, and fostering low-cost common sense practice in the collection, care, and preventive conservation methodologies, using available materials and equipment and evaluating their performance, among other topics. Number 6, collaborations and partnerships. We decided to establish external collaboration with individuals and institutions that can help support the initiatives. We didn't have all the expertise on the site, and we recognize that. So we needed to create relations with professionals who can assist with their expertise on different projects. And last but not least, the strategic outreach, and what we have called from heritage to conservation. First, we had to identify our audiences. Educational content needed to appeal to the public to promote awareness of heritage and its conservation and how to preserve it. And at the same time, our educational content needs to promote the development of technical content to support the needs of emerging conservators and conservation practitioners. And this is critical to building a local body of knowledge on the field. These approaches are sustained by internal collaborative efforts from regional practitioners, in our case, the Center's Board of Governors. Since the beginning of this journey, I have kept asking how others in the past have done it. Building projects and establish institutions that promote the visual arts, culture, and preservation and conservation of cultural heritage is indeed a colossal initiative. For me, it was daunting at the beginning, especially when financial resources are scarce. Even though we are in the early phases of the center, we learned that innovation is a synonym for breaking through. Innovation is disruptive, but innovation is also adaptation and flexibility. As we start small, the center will adapt as it grows, as often most conservation projects do. In the end, disrupting the status quo and promoting the advancement of conservation is actually innovation. Thank you.